welcome to the Quail Creek Republican Club, our third virtual meeting. We are so fortunate to be able to use Zoom, to be able to continue to connect with all of our candidates, as well as all of our constituents. It's certainly a pleasure to be here. I hope that this Friday, May 15th, finds all of you safe and healthy and happy and ready to, if you live in Quail Creek, make your reservation to go to the swimming pool and the gym and play tennis and pickleball. And I know I see you all walking when I'm on my way to work. So it has just been a pleasure to see that even though the rest of Arizona was shut down, things were still happening at Quail Creek. So it's a pleasure. I hope everybody's healthy and well. Again, looking forward to getting back together. We will be making some announcements at the end of our meeting today. But as we begin today, let me just introduce who's on the screen, who you see. You see Benny White, who is our candidate for county recorder. You see Eric Rudin, who is our candidate for CD2, congressional candidate. You see our very own Rich Ullery, first vice chair of the Quail Creek Republican Club. Sergio Ariano, our Continental School Board member and candidate for Continental School Board. And our treasurer of the Quail Creek Republican Club, Tom Fisk. So we're going to start this morning with our agenda will go as follows. We will have an opening prayer that will be done by Rich. We'll do the Pledge of Allegiance, which will be done by Tom. So when we get to that section, what you're going to see on your screen is a flag, and Tom will be saying the Pledge of Allegiance. As you are, wherever you are, please join with Tom as in the pledge. And then I will come back and we're going to recognize who all of our candidates are in our community. And then we'll start and we'll introduce the candidates. So we're going to hear from our congressional candidate, our county recorder, and then we'll hear from our Continental School Board member. Then we are very excited because we have a special guest, our very own Chairman David Eppiheimer, Chairman of the Pima County GOP, is going to join us, and he has some comments as well. And then I will make the closing comments. And now during this, if you're on YouTube with us, you have the option to type in questions. So as our candidates are speaking, if you have a question for them, please just put their name and whatever your question is. At the end of our three candidates speaking, we will read the questions and direct the questions to each candidate. So we look forward to an interactive session today. That means that you get to ask questions and get involved, as well as just watch our meeting as well. So interactive, participative meetings, that's what we're doing nowadays. So ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to start, and I would like to ask Rich Ullery, our first vice chair, to lead us in prayer. Mr. Ullery.
Please bow your heads as we ask for the blessings from our Creator. Our Father in heaven, we thank you for this opportunity to meet, even though we cannot be together physically. Our nation and the world has always needed your divine guidance, but we need you to flood the nations with your grace and mercy and relieve us of the scourge of this virus. Heal the sick, protect the caretakers and our first responders, and restore the livelihoods to all those who have been devastated by this economic shutdown. We ask you to bless our speakers today. We thank them for the personal sacrifices that they bear in running for public office. And we pray for our country, for President Trump, and for all of our elected leaders. May they always acknowledge you as God and Savior, and seek your wisdom and guidance as they lead our beloved country. We pray all of this in your precious name. Amen.
Thank you very much, Rich. Okay, Tom, now what we're going to see is we're going to see a flag. And Mr. Fisk, as that flag comes up, will you please lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic
for which it stands, one nation under God,
under God,
indivisible,
with liberty and
liberty and
justice for all.
for all.
Thank you very much, Tom. So, ladies and gentlemen, as we begin today and we start talking about the election time, this is a very exciting time for us because pretty soon we're going to get to vote here and we're going to have our candidates. We've met a lot of our candidates and we're going to bring many of our candidates even down to Quail Creek in the future. We're hoping to bring some of them in for a kegger. So we still have lots of things we're looking forward to. Let me just go through a list of candidates for you to start researching as you're preparing to vote. So for our president, we will be voting for President Donald J. Trump. And for the US Senate, we have Senator Martha McSally and US Senate candidate Daniel McCarthy. For CD2, today we have with us Eric Rudin, and we have Brandon Martin and Joseph Morgan. For LD2, for the Senate in Legislative District 2, we have Mark Workman. For the House in Legislative District 2, we have Deborah McEwen. There is a write-in candidate, Louis Ackel, who will also be running for LG2 House. For our sheriff, we have Mark Napier. For our recorder, right here today with us, we have Benny White. For the treasurer, we have Treasurer Beth Ford. For the assessor, we will have a write-in candidate, Joanne Sabah. For our board of supervisors, we have Steve Christie and John Backer. For the Sarita City Council, we will select 5 members, and the candidates are Bill Bracco, Melissa Hicks, Gil Lusk, Simon Davis, John Mallett, Teddy Tesso, Ryan Huber, and Deborah Morales. So as you're, as we're preparing here for the election, those are your candidates. We want to be researching them. You've met many of them, and you're going to get a chance to meet a few more today. So I'd like to begin. Our first candidate that we're going to speak with today is Eric Rudin. Eric is a local guy. He attended Swagaro High School. He's a self-made entrepreneur. He's the owner of Essential Pest Control. He is the owner of the Hitting Factory and indoor baseball facility. He has a bachelor's degree in business management. He is a competitive travel ball coach and has assisted athletes in getting to college on those coveted scholarships. He's a former Tea Party activist here in Pima County. And most importantly, Eric is a concerned citizen wanting to help better our community. It's my pleasure to introduce congressional candidate for CD2, Eric Rudin.
Thank you, Shelley. I appreciate that introduction. And I want to thank everybody with the Quail Creek Republican Club for allowing me to speak today. I'll give a little bit of background myself, an abbreviated version, but before I do that, I do have a big announcement that I'd like to share. I am the only congressional candidate for CD2 that has been placed in the Young Guns program with the National Republican Congressional Committee. This is a big deal because it basically means that our race is being recognized nationally. During the COVID crisis, you know, a lot of campaigns have been struggling, but we've been working behind the scenes to get some national recognition with this race. To be frank, before I got into this race, this was securely a Dem hold at an 8.5-point lead. And we've worked very hard to get some national recognition and change that dynamic here locally. I've been fortunate enough to talk to the White House team. They're very excited about Arizona. We obviously know the Senate race is very important, and they want to have good quality candidates on the congressional side all the way down the ballot. So I would encourage everybody greatly that as we start getting out there and getting about, to really get active, bring a friend to the poll, get them registered to vote. I know that your particular club is highly active, but we have a lot of work to do within our district. But I can assure you that we have brought some national prominence to this race. And the funny thing is, when I talk to people back in DC and we give them our data and our numbers, they come back and they say they agree that they see a path to victory. So that's really important for us. And I hope we're very excited about that. On a personal level, you know, you had highlighted my career. I guess the big thing I want people to know about me is, you know, I'm kind of that guy that started at the bottom. Really, my big break in life was applying to a newspaper ad for $6 an hour to be a pest control technician. Didn't have a lot of direction then, but I was very fortunate. I had a very strong work ethic. I was able to work my way up from being a technician to a supervisor, manager, and eventually all the way up to vice president of a local company, Northwest Exterminating. We grew that organization from 25 employees to over 100 employees before I had the opportunity to buy my own business 13 years ago. And despite a tough economic recession, we were still able to grow that business more than 300%. So I do have a track record of success. One of the reasons I got into this race is I was concerned that was there a path to victory, because I thought we needed better representation than we currently had with our current representative. I do have concerns that she has been absent for more votes than any other member of Congress this legislative session, specifically when the CARES Act was passed and all the elected officials were at the trough and getting funds and stuff their community. Her and Grijalva were absent for that particular vote, and we didn't get any additional benefit from Southern Arizona, which I think is problematic. But with that being said, with my background, I think a lot of people want to know what are some of my core beliefs, my background. I am very conservative. I tend to focus a lot on budgetary issues, but that doesn't mean socially that that I'm soft. I'm definitely very pro Second Amendment, pro-life. I check the boxes of a conservative. I've been a Republican my entire life, being a Tea Party activist. I think I have a little street credibility in my background as being pretty conservative. But I think where we need the biggest support is within our economy. My key focus right now is post-COVID economic recovery. And if you look at our community specifically, we've been hammered pretty hard. When you start looking at statistics, people making under $40,000, 40% of them have lost their job in some fashion. You also look that we have a big Latino community. And if you look at some national statistics, they've been hammered very hard because a lot of them are in the trade industry, trade jobs. So when you look at the actions recently from the small business owner to the employees of those businesses and the average working person, they've been hit pretty hard on this. When it comes to some of the issues that I thought were very important pre-COVID, they were still within that economic wheelhouse. I understand that we need to have a very strong, secure border. We want to negate the negative behavior of illegal drug trafficking, human trafficking across our border, but I also believe we need to have big economic gates that create jobs here in Southern Arizona. Most people don't realize, but we have $700 billion with trade annually with Mexico. 300 billion of that is US jobs and goods going down south. I think there's a great economic opportunity for Southern Arizona. We've all grown up in Southern Arizona. Well, we've been around Southern Arizona a lot. I did grow up here, but there's a huge economic disparity between the Phoenix market and the Tucson market. And if you rank the top 100 communities in the country, Tucson doesn't fare quite as well. One of the other issues that I think are very important is Social Security and Medicare. My position is very simple on this. I want my children, my child, to have the same economic opportunities and benefits that my parents had. These programs are in a little bit of trouble. Actually, before COVID in 2020, it was the first year that we were going to take in less revenue than we had expenditures for Social Security. We talked about insolvency being within 14 years, Medicare within 6 years, but I can assure you that those numbers are grossly off at this point. You just think of how many less payroll taxes that we have collected during this time, and you're going to see that that escalations of insolvency is going to hit us a lot faster. Now, I don't say insolvency is a scare tactic. That doesn't mean that those programs are going away, but it does mean that day one, we'd have to be 100% reliant on the funds that we bring in from payroll taxes, and we would go from 100% of our benefits to just under 80% of those benefits immediately. So that's a big concern with me. And then budget is also something that I'm very concerned with. I have no illusions at this point that we are going to pass a balanced budget anytime in the near future, but at the same time, we have to pass a budget. We operate on a continuing resolution consistently. Militaries hate it because they can't get their projects, they can't get funding. That's a huge deal for Davis-Monthan, Fort Huachuca. They would like to see a budget, and sometimes you have to take on those tough issues that come there. So that's pretty much my platform in a nutshell. I don't want to abuse my 10 minutes, but I am certainly open to questions later. But I think that gives kind of a firm background to some of the things that we've been doing. And I think we have a real chance to take the seat back, and we're going to need your help to do it. So I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much, Eric. Thank you. It's good to hear that Washington, D.C. recognizes that the folks in Southern Arizona are ready for a change in leadership. That's great news.
Yeah.
Okay, so our next candidate. So if for those of you who are watching now, take some time, go in, and on the YouTube chat there, you'll be able to put in any questions that you have for Eric, and Eric will have an opportunity to address those questions after we hear from all of our candidates. So our next candidate that we're going to hear from today is Mr. Benny White. And Benny was in the Marine Corps from 1967 to 1974. And I learned when we were signing on right before this meeting that the picture behind Benny is very, it has a story behind it. And he was in the Tucson Air National Guard from 1975 to 1988. He has a bachelor's degree from the University of Arizona in 1975 and law school from Concord Law School in 2007. He received his Juris Doctorate. Benny was a commercial airline pilot from 1968 to 2005 with Delta Airlines. Benny, I am a Delta medallion something, diamond or something, and I'm starting to miss flying. So I'll bet you miss it a little bit too. Benny has been politically active in the Arizona Republican politics since 1995. He's been involved in campaigns from the president down to city council and justice of the peace and everything in between. Election oversight in 2008 and to 2020, Pima County, City of Tucson, statewide races, data analysis of voter registration, early voting, canvasses and audits of elections, legislation and election procedure manuals for 8 years, 4 revised cycles. Benny White is known in Pima County as the data guy. If you're a candidate, Benny White's the guy. I'm ad-libbing, Benny, sorry, but I just want everybody to know that when you're a candidate, Benny White's the guy that you go talk to help you understand your districts. So Benny won the nomination petition challenge against a Democrat in the Supervisor District 5 race on April 29th, 2020. Congratulations, Benny. He represented himself against Trista Trampush de Genova. Chang. I think I've got the name right, but Benny, feel free to correct me, please.
Yeah,
It turned out that there were 168 of the 289 submitted signatures were found invalid due to fraud. So before Benny even takes office as our county recorder, he's already working for you. May I introduce, with my pleasure, to introduce Benny White, candidate for county recorder.
thank you very much, Shelley, and everyone who's listening in. I very much appreciate the opportunity to talk to you. This campaign season is very challenging because we can't have our meetings to shake hands and greet each other and get to know the faces that we're talking to, but this is a wonderful opportunity. I'll give you a little bit of my background and then talk a little bit about the office of the recorder and what roles they play. I grew up as a poor kid in Oklahoma. I joined the Marine Corps, as Shelley said, during the Vietnam War, served as a fighter pilot flying A-4s out of Vietnam, out of Da Nang. Then I went into the Navy Training Command. Following my tour in the Marine Corps, I joined the Tucson Air National Guard, and I was the commander of the National Guard Fighter Weapons School there for several years before my retirement in 1988. I had an overlap in careers between my military flying and my commercial flying of about 3 years. I wound up flying for Delta Airlines for about 20 years, and in that capacity, I flew both domestically and internationally in almost all the countries in the Northern Hemisphere. So I'm very familiar with a lot of different communities and societies and cultures, and I've worked with a lot of different people throughout my military and my commercial airline career. And we have a very diverse community here in Pima County as well that I'll be dealing with as the recorder. Toward the end of my career at Delta, I was selected by the Airline Pilots Association to participate in a presidential commission called Safe Skies. And the purpose of that commission was to reduce major airline accidents of wide-body aircraft. At the time, we were killing about 1,000 people a year in major airline accidents. And during the 2 years of that commission, we held monthly meetings with experts all over the world looking at accidents. And the learning that I got out of that effort was that you can walk into a room thinking you know everything, but when you talk to real experts that deal with very complex subjects on a daily basis, you can learn a lot. And I've learned that as well, working with the state officials all over the state on election matters, the county recorders, the director of elections. And I've also worked with the vendors of election equipment throughout the years. Talk a little bit about the role of the recorder. Some people know that they're involved somehow in elections, and they also do something with regard to recording. The recorder has the statutory obligation to keep all the records for property, real property in the county, for the deeds, the mortgages, the liens, the loans, all the transfers, those kinds of things. And they also keep records of all the personal documents that people want recorded, such as their wills or any kind of trust that they set up, those kinds of things. That is about 10% of the recorder's job. The other 90% of the recorder's job involves something having to do with elections. The voter registration is the biggest part. That's an ongoing, everyday update requirement that interfaces with other states and with every county in the state through the Secretary of State's office. That is one of the main reasons that I would like to hold this office, is to clean up those voter registration rolls. As I've been collecting signatures for my petitions, and now I'm walking in the neighborhoods to get my name recognition out in front of the voters, I find that about 20 to 25% of the records that we have currently in our voter registration database are invalid. The names are wrong, the people don't live there, the addresses that we have don't exist, there's no house on that lot, all of those kind of things. I want to clean that up as a recorder so we actually know who the qualified voters are in this county. both for election purposes and for the candidates running the campaigns. The recorder, as I say, does that on a daily basis. You recently received a voter registration ID card from the county recorder. What happens with that card is that's non-forwardable mail. So that card comes out to your the address that is in the registration. And if it's not deliverable because that person no longer lives there, that address does not exist, that goes back to the recorder. And at that point, the recorder is supposed to remove that voter from the active rolls, put them into an inactive status. When they follow up at that point by trying to contact the voter personally and find out, have you moved, who are you, all those kind of things. That is not universally done in Pima County. So the rolls get out of date. The recorder is also involved in petition challenges, both for nomination petitions, which is in the period we're in right now, and for propositions and initiatives that are put before the voters on the ballot. That is a very complex set of laws that apply there. There is a lot of discretion exercised by the recorder in those procedures, and that can go either way. Sometimes the recorder puts her or his thumb on the scales a little bit to favor one party or the other. My personal belief is that that should not be the case, that the laws should be clear, the procedures should be clear, so that everybody knows what the rules are going in, and then the rules are uniformly applied to everyone. And so I want to work on that as the recorder as well. Another big important area that the recorder is involved in is signature verification. Every mail ballot that comes back to the recorder has a signature on the affidavit envelope. That signature is supposed to be verified by the recorder, and what they do is they take the piece of paper ballot or the ballot envelope rather, and they compare that to the signature of record in the computer database. And that could be when you got a driver's license, when you filled out any kind of a government form. Typically there are 5 or 6 records in there for every voter. And the signatures change over time as you age or you're taking medication or you've been injured. Your signature will change, and that is noticeable in that signature verification process if it's done correctly. However, that is a very, very monotonous job. And after 5 or 6 hours of doing that, human beings trying to do that job start making errors, and that is documented. So one of the things that I want to look at as a recorder is bringing some technology to work there to give us more accurate results that are verifiable and auditable, so that when a signature is challenged or kicked out for one reason or another, we have a record of what occurred there and why it was or was not accepted as verified. So that is another big area that I want to look at. Rules are different from nomination petitions versus the initiative petitions. So we need clarity in both of those areas of our laws. The recorder is also involved in lawsuits, election contests, proposition contests, all kinds of lawsuits come up from time to time. Our county recorder's office has been rather passive in those lawsuits. There's a requirement in state law that anytime an election challenge comes up that possibly affects our state laws or our state procedures, all of the county recorders are necessary parties to the lawsuit. Well, our current Secretary of State has agreed in 5 different instances to make changes to our laws through consent agreements without including any of the county recorders. Well, the county recorder has the ability to join those lawsuits as a necessary party and have their voice heard in whether the lawsuit has merit or not. That's an area that I have to work with the county attorney. Barbara LaWall prioritized domestic disputes over election fraud. I'm going to try to change that with the new county attorney, whoever that winds up being. It'll be a Democrat because we don't have a Republican on the ballot. But I will work vigorously trying to have some input there either with our local county attorney or our state attorney general, Mark Brnovich. And those lawsuits have big effect. We currently are in a situation where you can register to vote at the motor vehicle division without proof of citizenship. And a court order was published 2 years ago that said that even though Arizona state law says that you have to have documented proof of citizenship, you don't really have to do that. For federal elections only, you can vote a federal election ballot, but you can't vote a state ballot. Well, that really confuses voters and lawyers and everybody else. That needs to be cleared up in the courts, and I'd like to take some action on that as well. With regard to my campaign, as I said, it's been very difficult not having the ability to meet people personally. I have ads running on Facebook. You've probably seen some of those if you're ever on Facebook. I've had ads running into Green Valley News and the Swarita Sun, both in their online versions and the print version. The response there has been okay. Donations have been nil from those, and I want to talk about donations at the end here just a little bit. I'll continue. All right. I'll continue that effort and try to expand my outreach to voters to get my name recognition built up. But one of the real problems that all of us have is getting donations, and we want to make sure that you vote for us. So anything that anybody can do out there, even if it's just $10, that's a good showing of support for the candidates. It gives us a little spirit in our step, tells us to get out in the morning and go do our jobs. And I would really appreciate it if you can go to my website, bennyforrecorder.com, and take a look at everything that I'm saying on there. I'm posting videos and news and events that we're doing. So appreciate it very much. Vote for me in August, vote for me again in November. Thank you.
Well, Benny, thank you so much for that. I think that was just a little civics lesson for a lot of people, because I sure learned a lot about what the county recorder does. And it seems to me like you are ready for the job. Now, Quail Creek Republican Club does not take a position in a primary, but Benny, as you are our only candidate running for county recorder, I can say with a great deal of confidence that Quail Creek Republican Club will support you wholeheartedly.
I really appreciate that.
You will have all of our support. And to candidates who are in a primary, and that would be you, Eric, and maybe you, Sergio, and other candidates who have come to meet with us, we will be doing phone banking to get out the vote for you in July. And once we have our candidates selected beginning in August, we will work for our candidates in the area of Quail Creek. So certainly precinct 84 and as well as Green Valley. So Benny, thank you very much. That was very appreciative. All of our candidates need money, ladies and gentlemen. I've said this before. They all have websites, and you can go to their websites and you can donate. Those signs cost money, the radio ads cost money, and so we need to do all we can to help our candidates get elected, and money is part of that. So it is my pleasure to introduce our third candidate, and I want to just say a little bit. Sergio has been born and raised in Tucson, Arizona, another local candidate. Sergio's parents are from Sonora, Mexico. I've had the pleasure to meet his family. So Sergio is a first-generation American. At the age of 17, Sergio joined the U.S. Army, and he served for 10.5 years before leaving the Army due to combat-sustained injuries. Sergio has been very active in the Republican Party as the Latino Outreach Coordinator for the Republican National Committee in the state of Arizona. He was the former Legislative District 2 Chair. He is a precinct committeeman in our precinct, Precinct 84. He's a resident of Madeira Highlands. And he is completing his 4th year of his first term of 4 years as a Continental School Board member. Since my appointment in July, it has been my pleasure to serve with Sergio. As a father, a businessman, and a fellow school board member, may I introduce Sergio Arellano. Sergio?
Thank you, Shelley. That was a glowing introduction. Really appreciate it. Shelley, members of the Quail Creek Republican Club, and everybody viewing us here. My name is Sergio Arellano, and talked a little bit about my bio, about how I joined the military at the age of 17. And so just want to recap a little bit about myself. I haven't been really out there since I last ran for office. And so just do a little recap and then tell you guys what's on my mind and what's going on in your school district, in your area that impacts our children. But to go back, I am a first generation American, joined the Army Infantry April 1st of 2001. And, I joined because I wanted to give back to this country and show gratitude for what it's done for my family and for allowing me to be raised here in the States. And when I joined, they qualified me for a lot of jobs, and the recruiter up at the National Center here in Phoenix said, we have all these jobs for you, but one of them has a $6,000 bonus. And I said, well, $6,000, what is it? And they said, it's the infantry. I did not know what the infantry was at the time. I just knew I wanted to be in the military. And so I said, go for it. Sign me up. What's it about? And the recruiter says it's a slightly harder basic training, but you get to play with guns. So what 17-year-old kid from the south side of Tucson doesn't want to play with guns and get a bonus? And so I raised my hand April 4th of 2001, quick shipped out. And lo and behold, as I'm graduating basic training, September 11 hits. And, a lot of my friends had actually told me that the infantry goes to war. And when I asked the recruiter if I was going to go to war, he said, no, Desert Storm's been over with. I don't foresee anything happening. So there we go. 2 years later, they have me training in Fort Benning, Georgia, in Fort Irwin, California, for desert extreme weather training. And then I shipped out of Fort Riley in September of 2003. During my time there, I was involved in the fight for Ramadi, Fallujah, Habaniya, and Al-Assad. Lost a lot of friends, and me myself was involved in a roadside bomb. Fast forward a few years, and I ended up working as a Wounded Warrior state representative for Department of the Army, and made a lot of incredible contacts and knew I wanted to continue working in my community. And I just started serving as a precinct committeeman 9 years ago, I think, 10 years ago, 9 years ago. Started taking my newborn baby daughter to all the Quail Creek meetings and the Sarita meetings and the Green Valley Republican Club meetings. And I had a lot of babysitters there. A lot of grandparents stepped up, they call themselves. And Shelley was one of the incredible people I actually ran into at that time. And it's been a lot of help, a lot of support. This club has grown a lot. You guys have grown a lot under Shelley's leadership, and I'm very proud to see the effectiveness that you guys have, which leads me down to being involved on a local level, not only working for national and being a surrogate and spokesperson for President Trump, but also the state of our schools and our education. And I ended up getting involved when I saw that we weren't even doing the Pledge of Allegiance. Kids didn't know about civics, and teachers were getting mistreated and not even getting the full funding that they deserved. Being that I have two beautiful kids, two girls attending Continental School, I figured I might as well get involved on that level. Since my involvement in Continental School, we've brought back the Pledge of Allegiance, civics. We started a program that takes all our kids to Washington, D.C. The fifth graders begin going to Washington, D.C. to learn about their founding fathers and what American exceptionalism is and stands for. And I'm very proud. I know that there's more work to be done, especially with liberals that have invaded our school system. And I think that by having conservative voices such as Shelly's and Mr. Ulrey, who's also on this board and also part of your board, we're able to make the changes necessary on a school board level so that our kids know what it's like to be an American and be proud of what we have, and know that the government, isn't really here to teach them about government. That's basically it. And so changes are being made. I want to continue on this board to continue making changes, especially with what's happening on a national level. We're seeing that superintendents are right now, actually, there was a news release, superintendents throughout the nation are disregarding the orders from the White House and lining up to follow orders from the CDC that weren't released. So to put it in retrospect, the Center for Disease and Controls released their own guideline and protocols for it to be disseminated. But the way that it was poised was to make it so that our children would not be allowed back to school if there was even a remote chance of occurrence of infection in Continental, for example. To date, Continental has not seen any infections. We've treated, sanitation procedures and our school environment and people working from home as accurately and as effectively as we can. With that being said, the White House is leaving it to the states and to the governors to decide when to open up, but superintendents and people on an educational level statewide are trying to prevent us from opening our schools. And I think that that is very extreme. There are a lot of people, a lot of children at home right now that don't have the right nutrition, the ability for parents to take care of them. COVID literally threw everything in disarray, and we're not doing what's best for our children by keeping them shut down and keeping them out of school. Yes, the COVID-19 is real. Yes, the virus should be taken seriously. And if people are in risk or at high risk of infection, then you should not return to work, or you should try to take every preventative measure possible. But it's shown that our students, our kids are able to effectively battle it out more. And it's also shown that there's a rise in the lack of participation from students on a scholarly level. At this previous prior school board meeting, Mr. Ulrey pointed out that we are doing our children a disservice due to the shutdown. Our exams were at below 50% of proficiency when it came to our kids passing or being proficient in any subject via math or English literature. And I think we're doing a disservice to our children, to the families, to our teachers by not allowing instruction classrooms to return to normal. And so we need to bring that back. We need to continue fighting and hold accountability for administrators. Every year since I've been there, and Shelly's been there since July, but every time we've had monies come in or it came time for budget, we are keeping our promise to giving our teachers a raise, which is something that I campaigned on 4 years ago. Was our teachers are severely underpaid, and we need to get every available monies to them. So when they receive their funding from the state, from the governor, other districts like Sunnyside and TUSD, who are always making the news, swept away the monies for the teachers. And in our case down in Continental, we were able to make a case that the majority of the monies and the funding has to go to our teachers, who are in charge of shaping our young kids' minds and futures. So I'm asking for your vote. I'm asking for your support. I'm asking for your help to continue fighting for our children, for our community, for our families, so that they are proficient, so that they continue learning about our great nation and want to continue pursuing their dreams, the American dream, and give them that opportunity. So thank you guys so much for allowing me to speak here. I look forward to being back in the community with you guys, campaigning and getting my message out. And if you guys choose to send me back to continue making a difference at Continental, I would greatly appreciate it. So thank you and God bless.
Thank you very much, Sergio. And I'm sure some of the numbers that you just heard may have seemed a little bit startling, but in fact, our students are not performing at the standard, and it is very alarming. So we are going to work very hard to make sure and continue what Sergio has been working on for 4 years to move our students forward in gaining academic success in both math and English language arts. So thank you very much. Okay, well, we do have some questions. And so I'm going to start with a question for Mr. Rudin. So Mr. Rudin, should you be our GOP candidate in November, how will you compete with the war chest undoubtedly available to Ann Kirkpatrick?
That's a tough question. Yeah, I don't think most voters understand how much money is involved with this particular seat. Last go around from a campaign cycle, Ann Kirkpatrick had about 900,000 that she raised in Southern Arizona, but she had an additional 3.5 million that came out of state. Basically DC money coming in to secure that seat so they could end up flipping the House. So you're talking a $4.5 million war chest that she had. The nice thing is that, I put some of my own money into the campaign to kind of kickstart things off. I was bummed out. We lost 3 major fundraisers right at the end of March because of COVID, but it sounds like they're getting back on schedule. I would say of the candidates in the race right now, I have more cash on hand, probably about 5 times more than both of the other candidates combined. We are going to try to raise as much money and try to match that effort. I think for a competitive campaign that we're probably going to have to get to that $2.5 million mark. That's why we've been so active in trying to get the DC people engaged. So when you look at elections, typically there are 4 elections within election. The first one is obviously getting the grassroots folks engaged and getting those small donations. Like Benny said, get the $5, $10, $20, $100, whatever donation you can give, get that in, get into the candidate. You can donate to my campaign at rudinforcongress.com. We certainly appreciate that. But then you have the second election is getting the establishment people, the clicks of the world and those sort of people, engaged in your campaign that can end up donating. And by the way, he has. And we've had quite a few other successful donors. Then you have to get the campaign of DC convincing, hey, this is a good race, and getting that money coming from out of state. We're the only campaign that's a WinRed partner. So that's the same campaign platform that the president uses so that we can co-fundraise with him to try to get him elected as things move forward as well. And then there's the 4th campaign after the primary, which comes to the independents, that we need to end up winning the election and connecting, especially with Republican women voters and also also women independent voters. So, it kind of takes a mixed bag with that. I would say at this point, I'm probably the only candidate that can even come close to those numbers, and we got to raise those dollars now. We got to get people engaged, because right now COVID has sucked all the oxygen out of the room. So when Benny was talking about struggling, and all the candidates, from president, senate, all the way down, they're all in the same boat. So we got to do that. I will leave you one factoid, which is kind of interesting. We are the one of only 2 primary candidates in the entire nation that actually had more money reported in a quarter than the incumbent, and that was our campaign against Ann Kirkpatrick. So that was something that was actually noticed. So that's an important thing, and we need to work on it, but we need your help, all of us.
Thank you. Mr. White, how secure is the mail-in ballot system in Pima County?
Well, it is secure, but it can be made better. And I appreciate that opportunity to address that with Kathleen's question. There's a lot of discussion right now about ballot harvesting. And ballot harvesting is when political operatives, typically the Democratic Party political operatives or the Democratic candidate operatives, go out into the community and they pick up the ballots from the people in the precincts and then bunch those together and take them into the polling places on election day to get them counted. There is a safeguard in Arizona law, as I spoke to earlier, that the signatures on those ballots all have to be verified. And so that is the safeguard, but it requires political party oversight. That's a role that every voter can play through their political parties, is to be involved in the oversight. For overseeing signature verification, you're in the room where the signatures are being verified and you're watching over the shoulders of the county employees who are doing that signature verification. If we don't have those observers there, then those employees can do whatever they want. There's no auditability of it, and you just don't know what happens. But Arizona does have a pretty good system in that we do have that signature verification process, and our laws are very permissive about allowing political party oversight. But it takes volunteers to step forward, give up your day or several days in the case of verification, because it goes on for about 3 weeks before election day and a week or so after election day. So there's a long period of time there. David needs a lot of volunteers to step forward for that process. You can watch the signature verification. You can watch all the early ballots being taken out of the envelopes and what the election board does with those ballots. But we need volunteers to do all that work. If you don't have that, which is the case in many of the counties in this state, then you're leaving it all up to the government employees to do whatever they want to do, and you have to just accept the outcome. So I really appreciate the question, and I hope that people will step forward and volunteer. At the end of the 2018 election, I did a review of the ballot returns in all of the counties in Arizona looking for ballot harvesting. I found what I think are ballot harvesting events in Cochise County, Santa Cruz County, a little bit in Pima, not a lot, but a little bit, quite a lot in Yuma County, and some in Maricopa County. I turned all that information over to the Attorney General and nothing happened. That requires a lot of investigation to go out and knock on doors of people and say, what did you do? And then get them to tell you the truth. We have a law in Arizona that says that ballot harvesting is illegal. My personal opinion, looking at the law, and I was involved from the day one when that was posted in the legislative bills, is that that law is probably unconstitutional as a violation of the First Amendment, number one. Number two, it's probably unenforceable because there's no language in there as to how you would establish criminality. It says that you can pick up ballots and turn them in so long as they're your family members, but we have no way to determine who a family is or is not. There's no records kept of anything that's happening. So the law is very unenforceable at this point. The legislature may want to take a look at that. If I'm the recorder, I would be able to provide my documentary evidence of what has happened in past elections. We can look at what happens in California. There was a Zoom meeting with Representative Shattuck yesterday with Stephen Riker, who's running for recorder in Maricopa County. In California, they have instances of candidates for public office buying votes. They go out to the voters' residence. They tell them to mark just one vote on that ballot, and they turn that ballot in with just one vote on it for one race. And so that would be obvious evidence of ballot harvesting influencing the outcome of an election. I've watched several million ballots being counted in my oversight responsibilities. I have never seen that happen in Pima County. That's not to say that it hasn't happened in other counties in the state, but in the last 12 years that I've been watching, I've not seen that particular instance. In Nevada, there's a new story today that the Clark County election officials sent ballots out to all the voters in the county, but they didn't make them non-forwardable ballots. So they're just sitting wherever they wound up. They didn't come back into the recorder's office. And so those ballots can just be picked up off the street and then voted. I don't know what their signature verification process is there. Hopefully that is in place and they can do it, but that's almost criminally negligent, in my opinion, for a recorder to send something out like that and leave those ballots out for people to abuse and to influence the elections.
Thank you, Benny. Thank you very much. Okay, Mr. Rudin, thank you for your candidacy. Jobs, jobs, jobs. Question, how can government agencies further communicate commercial job opportunities for the currently unemployed?
Well, I don't want to diminish the question because really government lately is doing everything but promoting jobs. You look at the CARES package that came out with their funding. Notice the dollar amount is if you're currently unemployed right now, you get $600 from the federal government to stay at home, which is $15 an hour, on top of the $240 typically you get your unemployment benefits from the state of Arizona. So they're actually getting paid more to stay home for the next couple months. And we got to be careful with the HEROES Act that they want to pass, the Dems. They want to extend that all the way through to the end of till January 1st of this year. And at that point, if you look at a lot of the jobs in Southern Arizona, you know, we have a lot of people that make anywhere from the new minimum wage of $12 to $18 an hour. And at that point, how are they motivated to come into the workforce? You look at locally at Pima County level with this new guidelines they threw out there for restaurateurs. I mean, it's just absolutely brutal. I mean, nobody can actually amend that. And Rahina has also been very negative towards the unemployment side. I think from a federal level, it starts with good policy if we're going to shift that. The nice thing is I am a business owner. I mean, Essential Pest Control has 30 employees. I've been doing it a long time. I have another business with a hitting factory. Being an entrepreneur, I kind of understand how that works, and I want to see good policy. I think some things when you create narratives, let's say like economic development with the southern border, then that means infrastructure upgrades, port of entry, roadways, those sort of things. Those create construction jobs here locally that motivates more businesses. You leverage areas in your community that basically have Fort Huachuca is a huge resource for us. In a sense, there's a lot of technology out there, quiet zones, electronic testing, autonomous vehicle testing. You can attract employers. We have a good roadway system where we connect to Texas, California, and Phoenix going north all the way to Canada, coming right off the border. You can leverage a lot of trade coming through there. So I think from a legislative policy, it's about creating a narrative, bringing some of those dollars back. We haven't had that through recent representation, but you know, Jim Colby many years ago was really good at bringing dollars back to the community. He took a little grief on that, but he was definitely an advocate for bringing those dollars back, and that's something that I would do. But we have to change the narrative that small business people are not the bad guys, and the employees that they employ are good people that just want to work and provide for their family. So I wish I can communicate that better, but I think recent government action has been everything but supportive to jobs.
Thank you. Sergio, what's the most important role of a school board member?
Oh, that's a loaded question. Because I feel that each individual has their own perception on it. But our role as school board members is to implement, pass, or change policy. B is also oversight when it comes to the firing and hiring of who's leading the district, whether it's a superintendent or weighing on the principal or teachers and so on and so forth. And then thirdly, which I think is very, very, very important, is curriculum. And it's evident at this moment in time that a lot of school districts were not prepared or did not have the proper, adequate curriculum for this COVID shutdown. Throughout my run and campaign in Congress, I actually had the privilege to go out to Yuma and see some high performing schools that were out there. And they currently throughout COVID didn't miss a step. It's because they had a curriculum that was set up to be a strictly online, in-person, or off-site teaching platform that measured their progress, their success, their failures. And given the era and the technology that we currently have, I think that's something that we have to look at as well. And it's indicative of all these schools and all these other districts where we don't have a proper passing generation of kids that are under proficient. And so as we look forward, I think as a school board member, curriculum going into this next year will be my top priority. But I think that is something that is key for those getting involved. And those of you guys tuning in and listening to us talk here, listen to everything that these candidates are saying, but also not only donate, but if you want to get involved via volunteering, even run for school board. If you're not in the Continental District, if you are in the district, anywhere you're at, tuning in, get involved on a school board level, on a district level, because that's where it begins. And you will be able to effectively make changes like policy, budget, curriculum, and shape the future of these young kids and these youth going forward. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. And so I think, Mr. White, there's another question here for you. And then we'll have two more questions, one for Mr. White and then one for Mr. Rudin. Mr. White, thank you for your service. How can Pima County government provide additional communication of data and information to the public?
Well, Tom, thank you very much for that question. One of the things I want to do as recorder is do a lot of voter education. Voters have a requirement to update their voter registration information anytime they change their address, change their name, or change their political party. They simply don't do that. And so we have a very mobile society here. About 30% of our population moves every year. And so keeping those voter registration records is extremely important to make sure that the voter gets the right ballot to cast a vote for the candidates that apply to their residents. Pima County does a fairly good job currently. It can be a lot better. I'd say offhand that they provide about 50% of the information that they could to the public through the public records. They provide voter registration data to the political parties on a quarterly basis. That's required by law. Maricopa County provides it on a monthly basis. Pima County could do the same. In this age of technology, it just takes a few keystrokes to publish that information. So the parties and the candidates and the campaigns could be able to be much more current in the information that they have available to them. The recorder also publishes early voting records to the party and to the campaigns as required by law. And they do a pretty good job of that. They report from the first time a ballot goes out 29 days prior to the overseas voters, the military voters, and then daily in both the request for new early ballots and the returns of early ballots. And then they continue that until all the early ballots are processed. And that goes beyond the legal requirement, but it is a good way that the parties and the campaigns can monitor the results as they're being changed on a daily basis, especially after the election. But I think that more records can be done. For example, both the recorder's office and the elections department do audits after the election. They look at how many provisional ballots were cast, how many were confirmed, how many were not verified, and the reasons that they weren't verified. I hear on a daily basis through my Facebook postings and retorts in the national and local media that there is no election fraud. There is no voter fraud. There are thousands of instances of both during every election. We have thousands of people that attempt to vote in every election who are not registered to vote. Even though they sign an affidavit said, I am registered, I live at this address, this is my name, They're simply not registered to vote. Those are violations of law. The recorder also will take a look at all the provisional ballots that are cast where the address is wrong. They cast a ballot in the wrong polling place, so they wound up getting the wrong ballot. Those require additional information. Where the names have been changed, where the signatures don't match. All that is a part of a public record that is available, but it is not posted on a website, for example. So I think all of that could be, and then people would be more aware of how the law affects them personally, and whether or not our county attorney and our attorney general and the recorder are doing their jobs to enforce the election laws, which is what I intend to do as the recorder.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Rudin, last question. Is there any way to reduce the partisanship in Congress? I can't even say it, so good luck with this one. Is there any way to reduce that in Congress, or is the gulf too wide and deep and permanent?
Yeah, this is actually an important topic for me. And I think there's a couple things that people need to understand. I don't think this is going to change in Washington until there's change of leadership within the House. I don't know, most people know, but on the Republican side, leadership average age, I think, is 56. And I believe on the Democrat side, it is 72. Nancy Pelosi's been there for a very long time. She's 79 years in age. She controls that side of the House with an iron fist. And I think she's almost just instinctively, everything the Republican said is bad and I need to go after them, instead of, hey, we need to address policy. So I do believe that flipping seats, changing people out is something that's very critical in going after incumbents. I also believe that there has to be some rule of law issues where, you get into Russian collusion with the president, that there needs to be people that actually get penalized for that, because then they can show that hyper partisan behavior, and when you break rules and laws just to destroy your opponent, that you're prosecuted on that. But the biggest and single most important thing that I think needs to happen is the attitude of the representative themselves. You'll never see me going after somebody and saying, hey, that person over there is a jerk, because you're going to have to work with that person at some point down the road. That doesn't mean you give up your core values. That doesn't mean you cave into some small, moderate, wishy-washy policy, but what you need to be able to do is at least be able to have the hard conversation. And I think there's people in Washington do that. For example, I know Mitt Romney's not very popular right now because he went after the president, but he was trying to put together a bipartisan commission to tackle Social Security, the two largest trust funds, Medicare and Social Security, a bipartisan commission of senators and House members that would work together to try to come up with a proposal to do that. And those are things that I'd have an interest in doing. And I think it comes down to your action, because I realize that if you really want to change the tone in Washington, it really starts with, you as an individual personally being willing to work with the other side. It doesn't mean cave in. It just means to sit down and listen, because it gives me the opportunity to speak my view. And if I didn't believe there couldn't be a change, I wouldn't be running for office. I understand why it's there, but we definitely need to flip some representation in order to get that accomplished.
Thank you very much. Mr. Rudin, Mr. White, Mr. Ariano, thank you so much for joining us here today at the Quail Creek Republican Club. Don't go away because we have a special guest now, but we appreciate you coming and telling us about your organization, your campaign. And again, we will share your website when we are compiling all of our candidate data for our voters. So thank you very much. So I am very pleased to introduce the chairman of the Pima County GOP, Mr. David Eppiheimer, and also to congratulate him. Mr. Eppiheimer will be going to the national convention in August, and I'm so excited. I know he'll come back to our club and bring all of his swag and all of his good stories, and maybe we'll even FaceTime and YouTube with him while he's there. Mr. Eppiheimer, Chairman Eppiheimer.
Well, thank you, Shelley. And it was very interesting to hear our candidates speak. All of you did a terrific job.
I'm still being streamed.
Pardon? And I hope I can do as well, quite frankly. It's an interesting time for the party. It was alluded to in most of all three of your comments in terms of party support. You know, the party is the ground troops. The party only really has two jobs as enumerated in the law, and that is to help register their party followers to vote, and then to get that vote out on election day. Well, and of course in Pima County, it's election month. So that's our job, and everything else sort of spins off that, and has to, in order to be relevant, has to deal with some aspect of that. So here we are in this period of time after the candidates have qualified for the primary ballot. Prior to that cutoff date, we were very involved with many candidates getting qualified, getting their signatures and their fives if they were running for government funding for their campaigns. They had to qualify with their fives. And so we had a lot of people on the ground helping candidates get their signatures. Now we're in this period after getting signatures and qualifying for the ballot and before the primary election, when we are essentially prohibited from helping candidates that are in primary contested primaries. There are candidates not contested, like Benny White, and there are candidates that are contested, like Eric. So we have some things we can do for Benny that we can't do for Eric, but that's the way it is in the law. So right now is kind of a downtime until the primary, and if you're wondering what has the party been doing lately, and a lot of people do, we get a lot of phone calls at the office, we get a lot of emails. You know, what are you guys doing right now? What's going on at the party? Well, we've been very active in many of the areas that have already been spoken to by our candidates. We've been very active recently in the election integrity area, specifically with the Election Integrity Commission of Pima County. It has been put on hold. It has been essentially disbanded temporarily, albeit. But the County Board of Supervisors had a motion put on the floor by Supervisor Christie last month to reactivate the Election Integrity Commission at this critical time when election procedures are being developed and implemented prior to a once every 4-year presidential cycle election. And the Democrats voted 3-2 to keep the Election Integrity Commission sidelined during this period, and of course blamed it on the COVID-19, and flat out said that the Election Integrity Commission does not have a meaningful role in the run-up to this election. That they might have a role after the election in doing some of the things Benny described, in watching the counting and the signature verification and things like that. But at the present time, they don't really have a meaningful role, which is poppycock. And I've spent quite a bit of time pointing out that poppycock. We've been involved in the all mail-in voting issue that was addressed by Mr. White. I did an editorial that was published by the Red Star on that topic, and that generated a scathing rebuttal from my counterpart at the Democrat Party, Allison Jones. So we've been embroiled in the all mail-in voting controversy. The Democrats are pushing it very hard at the national level. Administrator Huckleberry issued a county memorandum stating his position and placing the county's state lobbyist, Mike Rossi, on the project to do everything he could do in the state legislature this session to get a law passed for all mail-in voting in the November 2020, well, actually the primary and November elections this year. but it went nowhere in the legislature, thankfully. So we've been involved in that issue. We've been involved in the shutdown. And we've been involved very actively in encouraging the governor to open up as soon as possible, which we're happy that he did, and letting the executive order expire at the close of business today, I believe, is when it expires. And we're very involved in behind the scenes, urging the governor to bring that harmful shutdown to our economy to a close as soon as possible. I did a piece about that for the Chairman's Corner on our website recently. It's still on until today's issue comes out of E-Trax. I chose to scathingly attack our Democrat mayor and the Democrat mayors of Flagstaff and Phoenix for the pressure, the enormous pressure they've been putting on the governor to continue the shutdown as long as possible. And we all know why. This is a way to infect our government with socialism. The point that Eric Rudin made about the subsidies for people not working are by design. It is the actual implementation of the basic minimum wage that Bernie Sanders was pushing to make it more palatable, to make it more attractive for people not to work than to work and to go on the government dole. So we're vehemently opposing those efforts. And then finally, our main goal, our main job is get out the vote. And we're working very diligently on our Get Out the Vote program this year. We call it PIMA Victory 2020. And we have a plan in place. We've raised a lot of money already. The coffers are in our usual comparison, very full right at the moment in preparation for our Get Out the Vote effort. But we've developed a new plan to do something the likes of which Pima County residents have never seen in terms of a party-sponsored Get Out the Vote campaign. There'll be more on that as we can line up the funding, but we are very, very active in that Get Out the Vote role as it comes to the fore after the primary and before the general. The last thing I want to say is those of you who are on this broadcast, if you haven't yet submitted paperwork to be an elected PC, you still have about 5 days to do that. And the door is open on a write-in form that can get you to be deemed elected if your precinct still has vacancies in the allotted PC numbers. It just takes one form. And if you haven't submitted a write-in form because you didn't get your signatures in by that deadline, please do it. We need elected PCs. There's a reason to be elected rather than appointed later. Only elected PCs can vote in our December elections for our Republican leadership for the next 2 years. So if you want to have a vote for who's elected to be your leadership team for 2020 through 2022, you have to be an elected PC. That form is on the Pima County Elections website, not the Pima County Recorder's website, Pima County Elections. Just Google that and you can walk right through to the form. You can it's one page, fill it out. You can even mail it in to the elections office, which the address is right there on the website. It's one piece of paper and one signature, and then you can be an elected PC as long as your precinct has vacancies left in their allotment. So that's the end of my cheerleading. I know you've had a long meeting already, and I won't make it longer. But I want you to rest assured that Pima GOP is on the job. We had our monthly executive committee meeting last night. It lasted 2.5 hours to get through all the business we had on the agenda and that came up during the meeting. We had almost a full house in terms of our Zoom meeting with our officers actually attending. I think we only had one or two missing. So we are on the job. Everybody's very motivated and we have great candidates, and we are going to be working to get that vote out for you guys and gals. So thank you very much. It was my pleasure to be here, and we will see you as this unfolds.
Thank you very much, Chairman Eppiheimer. So, you know what's so exciting? Look at that, Sergio. He just went from being in his son's bedroom to in the car, I believe, driving. And so there you go. So Zoom, the new way that we're going to be doing business in Arizona, campaigns never end. We'll be with our candidates everywhere they go. So as we close our meeting today, I just have a couple of announcements that I'd like to make. The LD2, Legislative District 2, will not meet tomorrow, May 16th, due to the COVID virus. The Green Valley GOP office is open, and on Thursday they are having their brown bag speakers. I believe that's at noon. Bring a lunch, but you can call ahead and see. I'd also like to take this opportunity to recognize Jim Stone, who was the president of the Green Valley Sarita Republican Club for many years. And we are so grateful for everything he's done for our community in maintaining the Republican spirit in Green Valley. And to that vein, then, welcoming the new president, Yale Wisnik. For our Quail Creek group, and for those of you who are on our members are on our mailing list, we will be sending out a survey sometime next week because we're interested in knowing a couple of things. When are you going to be ready to come back and meet face to face? What kinds of meetings are you interested in, speakers? And so when you receive that survey, it's going to be very important. Very easy to fill out, just a bunch of checks and send it back. And so we'll look forward to that information. Our membership campaign, Each One Bring One. We do have a fillable form on our website. So you can fill in the form to join the Republican Club, the Quail Creek Republican Club. And we also have a PayPal account so you can pay with a credit card now. So you can pay right online. Our next meeting will be June 19th, and there'll be more information about that coming out. I would like to take this opportunity to thank our guest. Oh, Mr. Eppiheimer.
Before you thank the guests, I have one piece of information that you reminded me of when you mentioned the LD2 meeting being canceled tomorrow. Kathleen Wishnick, the acting chair of LD2, attends our executive committee meetings during the interim here. And she was at our meeting last night and announced that the LD2 meeting for June will be on the 20th. And at that point, they will be holding the election to replace the vacancy in chair and elect a permanent chair. So I just thought I'd announce that because Kathleen announced it last night.
Okay.
That's June 20th.
20th.
The regular LD2 meeting will be election.
Okay, thank you very much. And then as we close today, please take care of each other, check on each other, stay healthy, stay safe, stay informed. It's always a pleasure to be with all of you. Mr. Eric Rudin, Mr. Rudin, Mr. White, Mr. Adiano, Sergio, please do not take your eyes off the road. Thank you so much for joining us today. And Mr. Chairman Eppiheimer, thank you as well. We look forward to seeing everyone in June. Not quite sure if it'll be YouTube or if it'll be in person, but thank you all so much. Stay informed, stay healthy.